following presentation will evaluate the emergence of document cameras as they obsolete overhead projectors. While thinking about the technology equipment that is now stored in our school's supply room, I thought back on the emergence of the overhead projectors and their impact on education. During the emergence of the overhead projectors, they were used to project images and information from transparencies onto white screens for large groups to be able to view. Over time, they have also been used to display transparent manipulatives and review worksheets and problems in classrooms. As technology has improved and such projectors gained video capabilities, the overhead projectors have become obsolete. Over time, technology for displaying information for whole group instruction has improved with the invention of document cameras and active boards. The new capabilities that active boards offer, such as hands-on interaction for students, appeals more to them and increases their motivation to learn. The overhead projectors are no longer needed because document cameras work in conjunction with the active boards to allow a large group to view and manipulate documents or any three-dimensional objects. Not only is the object displayed in real view instead of a shadow, but the active board allows students to write on and become interactive with what's being displayed. Once a technology has had time to be tested in education and receives positive reviews, I'm willing to try to support its adoption. If I have found it successful with my own students, I will attempt to integrate it into my school. The document cameras with active boards are meeting the needs of our school's educational goals, but teachers could still use more training to clearly understand how to use the technology to its fullest potential. The overhead projector is an interactive tool for enhancing the presentation of teaching materials and allows teachers to use non-permanent markers to write on transparencies that can be used repeatedly. It facilitates communication between teachers and students by enlarging images for whole class viewing. This technology obsoletes the idea of the chalkboard being used to share visual information with students. The idea of overhead projectors may lead to new technologies that display what an actual image looks like versus a reflection or shadow. The overhead projector retrieves the idea of using projectors in movies on a reel to display them on a large screen. Document cameras connected to active boards enhance the ability for teachers and students to communicate and display any papers or objects for whole class viewing on a large screen. The active board also allows for interaction with the images displayed using computer tools to write on and manipulate what is being viewed. Document cameras obsolete overhead projectors and the idea of only being able to see a reflection onto a larger screen. The active boards are also beginning to obsolete the use of white and chalkboards for writing information for all students to view. In the future, document cameras could be replaced by new technologies that display holographic and interactive images to increase collaboration. They retrieve the idea of overhead projectors as well as the idea of using a microscope to be able to enhance the size of viewing an object. What do decision makers and end users think of overhead projectors and document cameras?
I conducted interviews with decision makers and end users of overhead projectors and document cameras to get their opinions on the influences that caused overhead projectors to become obsolete and document cameras to emerge into teaching and learning. The first question I had for them was, what were the primary uses of overhead projectors by teachers and students when they were considered an emerging technology into classrooms?
As a teacher, I was not an administrator when we had the overhead projectors as a primary technology, but as a teacher, I liked it because I didn't have to have my back to the students, so I could use it like you're writing on the board, but I didn't have to have my back to the students. I could face them, and that way I could more easily judge if they are understanding what I'm saying and explain things. And then students love to come up and write on the overhead as well. That was a great incentive for them.
After getting an understanding of the emergence of overhead projectors, I asked the participants if they still believed that overhead projectors are needed in the classroom or if other technologies have replaced them.
I think that there are definitely different technologies coming available that could and maybe even should replace the overhead projectors, but in saying that, I think we also need to be aware of not all school systems even have computers yet in their classrooms. So I don't know that it is necessarily going to replace the entire need for overhead projectors, but certainly there are other technologies available that we can look into, and the document camera seems to be one of those things. I just don't know a whole lot about it so far.
I do believe that overhead projectors still have a place in the classroom. That said, with the new technologies such as smart boards, Promethean boards, the slates, the different things that we have now, I don't know that by having them in the classroom, it's not just one more thing to have to use, but I do think that students could still be allowed to use them during their independent work, especially in the lower grades where they like to do things that they can interact with, as opposed to paper and pencil. So I guess my answer is yes, I do think they still have a place, not as big a place as they used to have. I think now they would be used more as an extra piece of technology rather than the primary.
The users of these technologies have all had different experiences with them as teaching and learning tools. I was curious to learn about their experiences using or observing the use of document cameras and active boards for instruction and learning and their impact on students.
I've only recently learned about the abilities of a document camera. I didn't understand that, or have come to understand that the document camera can show the three-dimensional aspects of an object, and instead where the overhead projector just gives a silhouette or a darkened image, a blob, if you will. And so the ability to have something project an image so that all students can see it and it look like a microscope, that certainly would benefit students in the classroom.
I think that overhead projectors needed to be replaced by document cameras because with an overhead projector you have to have something transparent, can put anything down. With a document camera you can put anything down, it doesn't have to be transparent, so you can put a block on there and you can see it. Overhead projectors called for transparencies, whereas document cameras you can put anything down and you can see it right away.
I then wondered why they thought there was a need to replace the overhead projectors with document cameras.
I had the wonderful opportunity to observe a classroom teacher who got a document camera new to the students. So at the beginning, the students were all very excited because this was a new piece of technology. The teacher, had to learn how to use it and adjust, and there was some adjusting period for the teachers and the students, and it was the novelty, the students were all excited. But then as another teacher who has used the document camera a lot longer, it was more of a tool for that classroom. It was a very useful tool. She used it a lot. The students used it a lot. But the novelty wasn't there because it had worn off, and it was something that they had learned to use as teachers and students, so they were much more efficient with it. But they used it still as a tool, and they were very pleased with how that worked out.
Yes, I have had experience, and the students enjoyed using it because we could see their work right away as opposed to waiting to go make a copy of it to put it on display. So the document cameras are very helpful.
Based on their experiences, I wondered if they thought the document cameras are being used efficiently by teachers and students, or what should be done to enhance their positive use in the classroom.
I believe that document cameras are being used as effectively as they could be in the classroom. I don't necessarily think that's the fault of the teacher. As administrators, we get very excited about bringing new things into our building and exposing our children to new technologies. And sometimes we tend to do that and we don't think about the time that we need to allow teachers to spend practicing and giving them the professional development they need in that area. So, no, I don't think they're being used effectively, but I do believe that falls at my feet as an administrator to make sure that my teachers are given the support and encouragement to step out. Everyone's not as comfortable with technology as most of us are. So I think that definitely more professional development in that area would help that problem.
When a technology is a progression or growth of a previous one, it's considered evolutionary. Thornburg gives details to how a technology is considered evolutionary when it goes through a predictable, nonlinear process, becoming exponentially more powerful over time. Before overhead projectors, there was not a technology that allowed users to present and manipulate information for whole group viewing using transparencies. As technology began to increase viewing capabilities, document cameras emerged. The document cameras provided a more powerful version of the overhead projector with added video functions and displaying three-dimensional images. When a new technology is a fresh emergence of the impact felt many years before another technology, its driving force is defined by rhymes of history. Thornburg clarifies how this effect or impact of the new technology is driven by rekindling an idea from the distant past. Before overhead projectors emerged, people became fascinated by technology allowing large group viewing, such as movie theaters with film reels on projectors. The overhead projectors emerged as a rhyme of history from the impact that movie theaters had originally had on such technology's emergence. This same idea eventually led to the overheads becoming obsolete, as document cameras made another rhyme in history of large group viewing. The document camera emerged as a technology that took the ideas of overhead projectors and microscopes and transformed them into the newest emergence in such technologies' rhymes of history. A disruptive technology suddenly appears to create a new way of thinking about a technological task. Thornburg explains how these new technologies have the same functionality of an existing technology, but they function more efficiently and lead to the original technology becoming obsolete. Before the overhead projectors emerged, there were no similar existing technologies. The overhead projector served as a great technology tool using copied transparencies, markers, and transparent manipulatives to allow for large group viewing. Yet this technology soon became obsolete, as there grew a need for a more advanced way of using such a tool to display any object as a three-dimensional image. The document cameras emerged as a disruptive technology to obsolete the overhead projectors by increasing the functionality of its tasks and improve its effectiveness. Another driving force of emerging technologies is from science-based science fiction stories and movies. Thornburg enlightens the possibility of the imagination of inventors being triggered by the concepts and technologies that are presented through science fiction. The emergence of overhead projectors was due to a need rather than an inspiration from science fiction. After overhead projectors had served their long-time use in businesses and education, they became obsolete due to a need for better quality of technology for large group viewing. Document cameras seem to have emerged more in businesses and education than in science fiction. Another driving force of emerging technologies is increasing returns when two technologies compete and one is chosen to emerge as the other disappears. Thornburg justifies this driving force, explaining how when two innovations hit the market at about the same time, by chance one technology gets locked in and drives the other to extinction. During the emergence of overhead projectors, it was the only technology of its kind to hit the market. Long afterwards, when document cameras hit the market and began to emerge, it was not in competition with other technologies, but it did push to make the overhead become obsolete. Red queens are the two technologies that move ahead of their competitors due to their fierce competition between each other. Thornburg explains that the name Red Queen is attached to certain phenomena when competition between two forces results in the rapid development of them both. As overhead projectors emerged, there were several brands selling them, but no similar technologies to compete with. The overhead projectors seem to have become obsolete as the document cameras emerged, rather than the two technologies competing at the same time for emergence. As document cameras have emerged, different brands have been in competition, but there has not been a similar technology to compete with. Document cameras have provided improved technology from the overhead projectors to allow for an interactive learning experience with large